Charles Chevelle.
Mr Speaker, I want to congratulate the member who's just resumed her seat for her contribution and to thank her for setting out so lucidly the case for opposition to this bill. And I'm pleased that the Green Party has decided to vote against the bill and join Labor, because we opposed this legislation from the start for the reasons, by and large, that Eugenie Sage has just set out. There are 6 reasons why this bill should not proceed, sir. The first is the point that's been made about its inconsistency with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. The entire purpose of this legislation is expressly to achieve a balance, quote unquote, between the environmental and the economic. Well, that is not the regime we signed up to when we became parties to UNCLOS. That is an inconsistent way in which to deal with those obligations, where the right to exploit resources is accompanied by a very strong duty in international law to protect and preserve the marine environment, and that will not be possible if this legislation becomes law in its current terms. The second reason, sir, that this bill is opposed by my colleagues and me is that it creates a regime that is substantially weaker than that is contained in the Resource Management Act. And there should be consistency between those two regimes. The difference between regulating the marine environment and regulating the environment on land is simply jurisdictional, it's not substantive. Local and regional authorities have already got years and years of experience and case law in terms of managing the activities that are within their purview, including oil and gas exploration in our territorial waters under the RMA. In fact, my colleagues tell me that some industry submitters heard from actually supported a closer alignment between this regime and the RMA regime on the basis that business would then at least have some certainty, that understand what rules and standards were going to be required of them. But instead we have an entirely new regime that lawyers and judges are going to be arguing about for years. Business is going to pay for that, and that uncertainty comes from the fact that the government has decided to legislate inconsistently with our obligations. The difference will also likely lead to litigation over the years, so there's not just a cost and an uncertainty issue. There's the transactional waste that all that activity represents. So the third reason that we oppose the bill is that the process for issuing marine consents under it needs to be much more transparent than it would be if the bill passes in its current form. We're concerned that there are significantly more restrictions and barriers for submitters than there are for applicants. That isn't fair, it isn't right, and it actually isn't healthy in terms of the sort of final outcome that would be desirable. And the bill blocking appeals to the Environment Court is a major issue as far as access to justice and transparency is concerned. The fourth reason, sir, that Labor opposes the bill is that iwi were not consulted in the drafting of this legislation. And that became quite apparent at the Select Committee. I heard some extraordinary stories about exchanges between iwi leaders and the committee chair. We're concerned that the involvement of iwi throughout the process outlined in this bill is only optional and at the discretion of the Environmental Protection Authority. The submission that was made during the Select Committee process that the bill should be amended to include reference to Māori and Moriori and tikanga Māori and tikane Moriori throughout the bill is absolutely right. Sir, we objected to the limited treaty clause, clause 14. It doesn't impose a general obligation on the Crown to give effect to the principles of the treaty. And finally, we are very concerned that the provisions covering penalties and cost recovery for breach of the Act are completely inadequate. Now, Eugenie Sage and the Honourable Ruth Dyson referred to an open letter to Amy Adams from the Environmental Defence Society, Forest and Bird, WWF New Zealand and Ecologic. It's an open letter to the Minister. It's a very, very important letter, and it's worth a read, sir, and I hope that all members, particularly members opposite, will have a look at that open letter, sir. With that, sir, I conclude my contribution, but I do, by way of point of order, seek to table the letter that has been sent to the Minister on an open basis.
Leave is sought for that purpose. Is there anyone opposed to that course of action? It appears not. Leave is granted.
Thank you, sir.
One further call. Paul Goldsmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.